Thanks, everybody. Welcome. So for today, what we're going to have is hopefully somewhat of a bit of an open discussion. I understand we don't have a mic for questions later, so it's going to be a little bit challenging to get your input. But anyway, so to start things out, the panel is all about this notion of active VR, and we'll actually get into what active VR is. It's somewhat of a new term, and people have a lot of opinions about that. So first off, we're going to start out with a quick introduction. Myself, I'm Robert Brackenridge. I am the Director of Games at Virtuix. And so one of the big things about us, obviously, we're all about moving around in natural motion on an omnidirectional treadmill. So that's how something like an active VR is very pertinent to what we do. And so I'm going to follow down the line here and let the others also give a little bit of an introduction about themselves. And then we'll kind of kick things off as well. I'd also like to know a little bit more about you. So Jan, please.
Yeah, hello everybody, great to be here today. My name is Jan Goetgeluk, I'm the CEO of Virtuix, and we developed the Virtuix Omni, which is the first ever motion platform to move around in the virtual world in games or other applications. And we have a demo downstairs at the entrance. If you haven't done so, you can check it out and maybe try it out, if the line is not too bad. But we developed the Omni, which allows you to walk, run, and jump in 360 degrees in games, which is crucial for first-person shooters, for example, and other VR games and applications that require you to move around from a first-person's perspective. And that is what we think, what we bring to the VR space is a motion solution to walk around in the virtual world.
Ray?
Yeah, my name's Ray Davis. Happy to be here as well. It's always awesome to come to these VR events. There's so much enthusiasm for the future here. I've been I'm at Epic Games. I'm a studio manager there. Most recently, we put together Bullet Train, which was an experiment playing with motion track controllers, the Oculus Touch, and obviously using our pedigree at Epic Games is shooters, so it seemed like a natural place to start experimenting and playing with. So yeah. Been in the game industry for about 15 years or so. Been working with VR, AR. Actually worked on the HoloLens for a bit, and Kinect and other fun things.
And my name is Nathan Burba. I'm the CEO of Survios, and we really work on active VR. Have been doing it for a long time. We released Zombies on the Holodeck about a year and a half ago. I have Raw Data, which is a shooter game as well. It's a co-op shooter, kind of like a holdout shooter that you can play in booth 2 downstairs. And we do a number of different things, develop software, games, some technology, and really looking forward to pushing the bounds of a lot of things and announcing some more things in 2016. We are also hosting an after party tonight and possibly an after party, depending on how the after party goes, and just a lot of fun things. We also have a Twitch stream that's going to be live at 8:15 tonight, twitch.tv/Survios, where we're live streaming from the party. So please tune into that, and just trying to push on all fronts, especially around active VR.
Cool. Excellent, excellent. So this is your turn. So one of the things that I'm very curious about as we come into VRLA, so how many of you, is this your very first time to a VRLA event?
Oh, geez.
Wow. All right, there we go.
So that kind of also makes me wonder how many of you are very new to the idea of VR? So would this be, for instance, the first time that you've tried a VR experience, or, yeah? Cool. So the topic here is a little bit advanced. It's not necessarily excluding anybody that's never done VR before. In fact, I think in some ways, active VR is sometimes one of the more preferable ways to enjoy VR for the very first time. So, but what I definitely want to get into with the panelist expertise that we have here, there's lots of ideas and discussions around the challenges, what areas of the problems that we solve. So we want to also dive into that a little bit as well as we go along. So one of our panelists, unfortunately, had an emergency, wasn't able to make it. That's Ashley. Ashley. And so Ashley was also kind of a bit dynamic into this whole panel. That she was more interested in kind of the exploration side of things. So I'm going to tweak this a little bit to where we actually focus a bit more on shooters, because we've got here 3 guys who've been really focused on the shooter side of things, which is actually quite interesting. For years, we've had this whole notion of VR and the headsets and the HMDs and so forth. For the longest time, shooters have been kind of the stepchildren of the whole VR experience for a lot of different reasons. And so I want to take advantage of these guys up here and ask them some of the questions as to why shooters now? Why does active VR kind of help this whole scenario out? And so prior to that, I'd also like to get a quick description, for instance, from each of the panelists about the projects that they've been working on, and perhaps describe how maybe active VR is a component of that. Nathan, perhaps you could start us out?
Sure. So active VR is really, well, it's at the kind of the crux of everything that we do. So we've worked on a lot of the pieces to put, sorry, I'm too close to the mic, to put something together. So for example, actually being able to walk around inside of a virtual environment using a locomotion system, and how that reconciles itself with the ability to actually walk around in something like a Vive play space. So that's a problem fundamentally that we've been working on for a while. Even the concept of a play space is something that we came up with about 2.5 or 3 years ago. The idea of having barriers around you that come up when you get close to the edge of it. The idea of being able to maybe have AR pass-through that switches when you walk outside of it. All that kind of stuff. And putting that together with an interaction system that's dynamic, so you could pick up, you could pick up a single object. You could pick up a single object with two hands. You can move your hands around on the object. All of those kinds of small systems. Then avatar systems, the ability to actually have a body where you can see your arms. We're doing all the IK systems to be able to have your body look correct, even though you're only tracking a few single points. Being able to animate your head and your mouth and make kind of fill in the gaps of the data that you don't have to make your character look real, so then you can actually be there with somebody else. So we kind of take a holistic view around virtual reality and try to put all of those pieces together so that we can recreate reality from scratch. Reality, if you don't have a body, sucks. Reality, if there's not somebody else there, sucks. If you can't pick up the object in front of you, it sucks. If you can't move around, it sucks. Really, we're used to doing a bunch of different things, and the idea there is if you miss any one of those crucial things, you really kind of only have a very small subset of reality. So to really put active reality or active VR together, you have to take all of those things, minus smell. I don't think we need smell, but everything else has to be there, and then you really get something that's special. So raw data is one game that can bring that about. Zombies was another one, and there's a number of other pieces that we have that we're working on to be able to allow you to explore, to interact with things, and to really be there with a lot of other people.
Yeah, just to kind of respond to some of that, I think Bullet Train for us it's a game experience, but for us it's really a demo. Because where we see at VR, the state of developing for it is it's still huge amounts of learning, and there's still these like massive looming challenges ahead of us. Locomotion is one that until recently I think there weren't a lot of great answers to. Your guys' interesting technology aside, of course. So for us, obviously we built a shooter and really exploring the teleportation mechanic. And any developer out there, within about 5 minutes, you can probably make a VR demo where you teleport around. But doing that in a way that people don't immediately puke and vomit, right? That takes a little bit more science and a little bit of magic. And especially, you guys are doing room VR with Vive, so you have the luxury of, that full tracking, don't have to worry about occlusion quite as much. We opted for Oculus Touch, and with the two cameras, it's effectively a 180-degree experience in reality. But in virtual reality, in Bullet Train, we try very hard to make it always feel 360, right? Because I don't want VR, the promise of VR to me is not staring into a window that is really pretty, but I'm still staring at a window. I want to put you in that world, and whatever you want to do, we make that happen. And I think we're close. I think there's again, on the teleportation in Bullet Train, after you've done it, our designers did a lot of work to make sure we always reorient you back to the action, right? So we're never some people get extreme, they get really excited and they try to choke themselves with a cable, right? That's going to be another real problem for a while.
Or a feature, by the way.
Or a feature, yeah. I don't know what kind of games you're into, geez. Sorry. What's our rating for this panel? Yeah. But yeah,
VR.
I think VR, yes. All things. Speaking of that, yeah, I guess where I was going with this too is that after our experience, we've been building VR since the very beginning, honestly. This version of VR, I don't know what our catchphrase is. Early, like many developers, we were bringing existing content onto the platform and just, hey, this looks awesome and I have presence now. And then we did something called Couch Nights way back when. I think that was for the DK2 when that came out. And that was our experiment multiplayer. That shared VR presence is huge. And I love this about VR. No matter what you're talking about, it always sounds a bit ludicrous until somebody actually has had the experience. And they're like, holy crap, I get it, But that was one of those magical, meta. You're in VR with a body, and you look around, and you see another dude, and he has a body, and he's looking around, and you're like, holy crap, we're in another planet, right?
You're you, and I'm me, and
yeah.
Exactly.
But then I turn into a unicorn, and you're a dragon, and the possibilities are endless. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for us,
Actively turning into
yes.
for us, we see active VR even as one step further. We see active VR as any VR game or application that requires you to move around from a first-person perspective, like walking or running endlessly in the virtual world. And you can think of first-person shooters, for example, or exploration games, or virtual tourism, architectural walkthroughs. All these applications require you to move around from a first-person perspective in this virtual world. And since many of you here are fairly new to VR, just to explain to you the problem of that, the problem is called the problem of locomotion. First of all, when you're sitting down on a chair and you're trying to play a first-person shooter in VR or any other active VR experience, you should realize that it is very hard to do because most people will actually get a bit nauseous, a bit, we call it simulator sickness. Your brain sees you're walking, your body is not moving at all, and your brain gets very confused, and it will induce, with most people, some level of motion sickness. So those active VR experiences are very hard to have when you're sitting on a chair. So the next step is, okay, Oculus and Vive now and Survios said, don't sit down, stand up, maybe take a few steps left and right, turn naturally, and that is a big improvement. That already helps a lot to have those kind of experiences, but you still have issues. If I'm doing a room scale VR
you're going to run into a wall.
You're going to run into a wall. You're going to take a few steps with your gun in your hand, and you're going to hit your wall or your coffee table. And then we also mentioned the cable management issues and safety issues that are also not well addressed at this point. So there's still a lot of issues to work out in that regard. But we feel that to have those kind of active VR experiences where you can walk around limitlessly, you do need a motion platform. I'm talking from my own shop now, but you do need something like the Omni to really make that happen comfortably and safely without motion sickness. Or you can come up with teleportation or other locomotion techniques which work great as well. I mean, Bullet Train is a great example of an excellent demo that I think most people will thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're gonna. It's still early days, and this is probably one of the biggest years for VR in a long time, where a lot of the dust will settle, and we'll see what are the trends. I think with our experience with motion tracked and teleportation, like that's going to be a very common thing probably for the next few years as developers. Like that is a tool we now know how to work with and can use for certain things. Hopefully someday we get an even more robust solution that we can rely on. I think to me one of the other things, like you speak about defining active VR, locomotion a big part of it. I feel like there's an obligation as a VR developer. We have this ability to fully immerse you into these magical worlds, and we can make any world that we want. Whether recreating reality, which is kind of boring, I don't know why you do that, but whatever, or taking you to Mars or someplace that never existed, right? And as part of that, like you immediately, everybody, especially their first time VR, they see something in front of them, or like a hologram or something, they reach out, they try to touch it, they want to interact with it, they want to move around, they want to explore. And one of the things we did in Bullet Train is like, yeah, it's all shooting and that feels awesome. But one of the things I fought for is when you start out on the train, every train has little things to hold on to so you don't fall over. And be able to reach up with my hand and actually interact with that, right? Yeah. I want to build worlds where everything that I feel like I can do or should be able to do, like is actually enabled. When you think about how you actually as a developer make that happen, that's really freaking scary. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I feel like that's to me the promise of active VR and really where we're all working towards, hopefully sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So in each of y'all's case, when you think back about the original content that you were putting together, so for instance, back when Bullet Train was just getting off the ground, back when Survios, even though that's further even back, thinking back further, what were some of the greatest challenges that you guys were facing that all of a sudden, thinking about moving around, thinking about locomotion, that was really going to be some of the things that would ultimately solve some of these challenges?
So I can mention a few of them. So one of them is obviously the nausea challenge, which I can tell you guys that Oculus is obsessed with because they're very worried about litigiousness in a new industry hurting them. So that's kind of. Yeah. But they look at it from that perspective. From our standpoint, and there's less at risk because we're not providing that hardware solution that they are. From our perspective, it's something that should be overcome just like you would overcome with sports. Like if no one ever complains they got nauseous on a skateboard or on a roller coaster, right? In fact, they say, "Oh my God, it made me puke. It was so amazing," right? Like and to me, that's what we actually need to start doing. Like we need to man up a little bit in VR, or woman up, or person up, whatever you want to say. We need to actually own up to this and say that we're explorers here. This is something that's new, and that we're going to have to fight through it a little bit. Some of the best demos that I've seen or that I've played are ones where you do get a little nauseous at the beginning, and then you fight through that, and you feel actually good the rest of the time. So it's something that we need to understand that it's we need to see if there's a way to make it so you're not nauseous ever. But if you are a little bit, that might be the price of admission for some of the best experiences, just like a roller coaster. And you're always kind of riding that edge a little bit.
Can I tweak on that a little bit? Because I definitely take the opposite approach of, last thing I want to do is make somebody uncomfortable in an experience that I'm building and delivering. Because I feel like that's putting in, that's friction in between you and the magic, And there's plenty of people, we actually use Kathna in our office. 99% of the time she puts a headset on, she's like, nope, I'm done, right? And we use that as sort of our benchmark. If we can make it so that Kathna can appreciate it, then we have the ability to go to the widest number of people possible. Totally agree with you, though, that there are some really magical things that are gonna make us uncomfortable. And in my head, I look at it as maybe it's for the next generation. I've got 2 little young kids, and my common joke there is my daughter learned how to swipe on the iPad before she learned to wipe. And their ability, they get to grow up with this technology, so it's a completely different, acceptance of it and understanding mastery of it. When I started playing video games as a young kid, it doesn't seem that long ago, originally it was just a keyboard. There wasn't really a notion of mouse, and then Quake came along, and holy crap, how do we do that? This is so crazy, and there's a little bit of discomfort for people on that. And then, the game consoles, we have these game pads, and some people are like, oh, you can never have a shooter on a game pad, and now there's probably a whole generation and a half of people who don't understand how you would play a shooter.
They had to learn how to use the interface, and there was a...
Yeah, and I think that's really, really fascinating, not even for us, because we're going to have to sort of bootstrap our way into this, but for the next generation that gets to start, on top of the shoulders, so to speak, and what feels entirely natural to them.
Yeah, and I agree with Ray. I mean, right now VR is still early market. VR enthusiasts, many of us here are probably early adopters. So for this early VR market, if there's experiences that are great, but they still make you somewhat nauseous, you as an enthusiast, you probably say, oh yeah, I get it, that's fine. To really become a mass market medium where your average mass market home consumer wants to get into VR, that may become a bigger problem. It may impede VR to truly becoming a mass market medium, because the mass market consumer is probably not going to want to fight through it. He may try it and then say, ooh, yeah, that was terrible.
So I think there's 2 sides to this problem. One is reducing these barriers on our side, on the development side. The other one is increasing education on the consumer side. So for example, people know how to use a keyboard. People go to school to learn how to use a keyboard. There's a lot of those things that we take for granted that we've actually been taught, we've been trained. And depending on what the interface is, you have to push that through kind of the training processes in your society. And if you don't have, if the thing you're learning to do is not good enough, you might not get through that barrier. So I think VR is going to have some of those things. I think some of them might be unavoidable. But I do want to say something real quick about what I've learned about being in the professional game development space, because I came at it initially from an academic perspective. Game developers have 2 things they look for. They look for something that can be as broadly accessible as possible, because people need to buy the game to play the game. And that's why you say 99% need to be able to look at this. VR does have that problem right now. You're going to find, once again, you're going to sacrifice some good experiences because they're not, 99% of people can't enjoy them. And then the other problem, not a problem, but it's an interesting friction between the academic and the professional side of the industry, is that art must be perfect. We've seen this with IK systems when we've talked to Valve in particular, where if something doesn't look amazing, remember games are art, and really kind of this amazing meta art. If they don't look amazing out of the gate, they're not to be released at a real studio. And so because of that, it makes there's a friction between, can you get, say, an IK ARM system up to 100%, or it's stuck at 95 forever. And if it's stuck at 95 forever, a good studio will not release it. And so therefore you won't have games that have simulated IK, but then, well, crap, now no one has ARMs, right? So it's kind of, how do you get past some of those problems? I think that's what the industry is figuring out when it comes to active VR in particular, more so than sitting down. And that's some of the problems we've been engaged with and have been talking to people about.
Yeah, I mean, academics have been making people sick in VR since the 60s, right? So
Huzzah.
I totally get it. And thank God they have, because now here we are. We actually have a viable course ahead of us. And to key on the point about, striving for perfection, I think, the type of games that I've always tried to make and Epic is known for is just really immersive, I think is the best word. In Gears of War, one of the design principles we had back in the day, it's an action shooter and all these sort of things. The first thing was we want to build this beautiful world, and the last thing we want to do is put a bunch of artificial UI in front of you, right? So even we get rid of a health bar, can we get rid of ammunition caps? What can we just remove from that whole equation? And I feel like with VR, it's again, our ability to give you this immersive experience is super powered. And so I feel like that obligation, I want to find all the things I can do so that you're never thinking about, oh, I'm in VR, right? I want you to be thinking I'm in this magical experience, right? Where you truly are losing yourself in that. That as a creator, that is the success criteria, you know? And then, yeah, to tie it back to active VR, I think that's what we're finding is that min bar, right? You need to be able to move around. You need to be able to reach out and grab things the same way you would expect to do in reality.
One of the things I found, and this kind of goes back to also just a quick shout out. So all three of these companies are out on the floor. I definitely hope that each and every one of you get the chance to go by their booth and actually see for yourselves what the meaning of active VR is in each of their application. But one of the things that I've seen across the companies is the development of the input has really taken, dramatic effect on the overall outcome and the usage. Why do you suppose that is? Was it the cart before the horse, or is the input creating the content, or is the desire for a particular type of content pulling in this need for a new input device?
I think the desire to have a natural input device for the hands, for example, hand controllers, has always been there. It's always been on Oculus's roadmap to have hand controllers. Just the technology to enable that. It's not that easy. It took them quite a few years now to get to the touch hand controllers, and Vive has the lighthouse controls, and they're amazing. But it's amazing technology that has only recently been developed. Now the technology is ready. Now game developers can take that technology and make these incredible active VR experiences.
There's technology and there's product, and sometimes they're conflated. They're saying all these inputs, they're all abstractions, right? Even a mouse and a keyboard, a game controller. These are like things that have been developed over time, and they lend themselves to certain experiences. The problem with VR is anything is possible, so any decision Oculus makes on the touch controller or on the Vive controllers, which still need to be a lot better, but the touch controllers are really good from their ergonomic standpoint. They're going to minimize the amount of things that can be made, and they're going to maximize certain other things. This is good for first-person shooters, but it's bad for picking up objects, or it's good for this, or it's bad for that. And the reason why we have mouse and keyboard and game controllers is that they're good for a large enough kind of portion of things that you can do that then people want to do. So it's about finding that balance, and then maybe there's things we can't do as much as we would like, because I think that's why the input came first, because people didn't even know. They didn't even know what to shoot for at first,
Yeah, I would say we've been looking for intuitive interfaces to technology from the very beginning. There used to be, I'm just reminded of the Power Glove. And the Power Glove was really just a controller strapped to your hand at the end of the day, but the idea of yes, my glove is digital and holograms and all that cool stuff. We're one step closer. And there was the rage about air mice or something. I was going to have a 3D mouse, and that didn't really
Minority Report kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And we spent a lot of this time when I was working on Kinect stuff, right? As natural user interfaces using, we could actually build a skeleton of your hand more or less. I think it's got a long ways to go. You're spot on. The ergonomics, like Oculus Touch, it's fantastic. It's a pistol grip, right? So if you're making a shooter where you grab a gun, it just feels really natural. Versus Lighthouse, it's more of almost kind of the magic wand feel, right? Yeah. But if I'm doing a Harry Potter game, I'm sure that's going to feel pretty good with a Lighthouse controller. At some point, maybe we get I'm sure there's plenty of new technologies around, companies like Leap, and I saw a couple others on the floor using depth cameras and other techniques. Eventually we'll probably get to that full holodeck experience, and we won't be designing games or creating content with the constraints of some ergonomics, right? We'll go back to, it's just whatever your body's capable of and whatever your brain is capable of, that's what we can leverage.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think the hand controllers or other technology that enables active VR, it's not only just about making it more immersive or making it more natural, it's also increasing the level of engagement. Adding a physical engagement level to the experience makes it a whole lot more fun and addictive. You can have these regular VR experiences where you look around, like the initial Oculus demos, you look around, you interact a little bit, and it's cool, right? You're pretty impressed, but it's not something you would do over and over again, because it's not that addictive. But you add physical engagement, like in our case, you walk and you run around, and suddenly it becomes quite addictive. It becomes engaging. People want to do it again and again. And ultimately, the key for VR is to become fun. Nobody cares about immersion or presence. Those are all buzzwords created by us in the industry. What the end consumer cares about is it fun? Is it
They
fun?
don't know we made them up. No.
Yeah. Fun, F-U-N.
Well, I'll tell you, the big thing, I think, once this is solved, and I think you're working on it, but once this is solved, it's going to unlock a lot of things. Right now, what we've seen in our research is that there's a certain level of fun or presence that is built up, body presence in particular, with a Vive type of experience when you walk around and you feel like you have a body. You feel like if something's going to hit you, it's like, oh, my body. Oh, wait, no, that's right, I'm in VR, or am I, or whatever, right? You kind of get that feeling. And then when you walk through a space, kind of like looking at like Henry Jenkins and the way he conceptualizes this, basically walking through a world is awesome. That's what makes a game feel like a game in a lot of ways. If you can get both of those, that's when you've really unlocked it. And what we found is that when you walk from point A to point B, you lose the body side, and then when you walk around in a space again, you gain the body side back, but then you can only walk through a certain space because you only have a certain size space. So somehow fooling the brain into thinking it's able to do both those at the same time is absolutely crucial in unlocking something that's really, really, really powerful. And so I think the first gen experiences are going to be one or the other, and then we're going to find some ways like, what is it, the GVS. You can basically stimulate your sense of balance.
The Matrix, where they plug it into your brain, and
it's kind of like that. Basically, it's like an electrode. It's like right here, and it can make you can steer.
It's going to be the alpha tester for that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, you can hurt yourself doing it, so it might be hard to market. But basically, you can steer people around. You can make them feel like they're falling to the left or the right, and then they'll adjust their balance based on it, and so you can make them feel like they're moving. So those brain interfaces and body interfaces are a ways off. It sounds scary and awesome, but I think there's we have to kind of try to solve that problem or try to think around it, like and for example, putting people on a ship and then flying them around and having them be able to walk around the ship, right? That's one example of kind of getting both a little bit. So that's kind of I think a big problem to solve.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important point there too. Is like we're all incredibly lucky that this is happening when we're all alive, because there's some really, you think what you're seeing today is amazing. Like give it 5 years, give it 10 years, it's going to be absolutely insane. But yeah, we're going along from the whole journey. So what we're talking about today may not be an issue 10 years from now. And the new tools and new techniques that we have may be a whole new set of experiences we haven't thought of yet. People are always quick to say, oh, is VR about gaming or is it about films or whatever? It's like, in my head, we haven't figured it out yet. There's something, there will be amazing games, there will be amazing VR films.
It's about everything.
It's not hard to believe it'll replace all other forms of computing. There's some really damn hard problems before that happens, cords strangling you, a keyboard, right? Everybody, does anybody like writing novels on their phone? No, the touch keyboard still sucks, yet we haven't found a better solution. And with VR, we don't have text entry right now, maybe voice to text or something like that, but once we sort of figure these things out, it's going to be super, super awesome. The other thing that comes to mind as far as like getting reality into VR, like locomotion and stuff like that, on one hand, I totally believe it. On the other hand, as a game developer, it's always about empowering people to do things they can't do in reality. And after, I've had lots of time to teleport around in the world of Bullet Train, it's kind of addicting, It's like, yeah, in the real world, I could walk across here and go shake that dude's head, and here I can press a button, boom, I'm there, right? And I can grab bullets out of the air and throw it back. Like, I almost think there's something really interesting of kind of ditching some of the constraints of reality when we look at that next generation of VR experiences we build.
Well, the key is you want to set up a logical system and then have people be inside the logical system, and as long as you don't violate the laws of that. So if you can teleport, make them, able to teleport, and it's fun. Walking around is fun too. So it's kind of, you're right, we should do other things, but the idea is as long as you're doing something that's internally logical, you're good.
Yeah, at CES this year, I'd just like to build on that a little bit. We actually demoed a multiplayer VR experience, a VR shooter called Omni Arena, where we had two different modes. One was a co-op mode where the players were actually walking around and shooting enemies together, and then the other being a competitive mode. One of the most interesting things, from a design perspective that I was seeing, I was fortunate enough to be on the stage watching both sides of play, was the way that they actually became physical in their strategy. So for instance, as they were running along, all of a sudden you would see a player just quickly turn and duck around an obstacle, taking cover, using that active component to turn around and create some new physical piece that's actually part of the strategy. There were lots of things that were all of a sudden starting to emerge from their behavior, from their activities, that now became part of the gameplay. And so one of the things I'd like to ask as a final question to the panel is, how do you foresee active VR creating this sort of emergent gameplay, which is being linked to a lot of the fun factor and a lot of, potentially that notion of immersion?
I actually think the most important emergent aspect of being active in VR is actually not for the player, it's for the spectator. It's for the person actually watching someone You know, if you're in the Matrix, like Neo's having a great time in the Matrix, but I'm having a great time watching him. I mean, he's dodging bullets, you know, like bullet train. He's doing all these crazy things, and he is super fun to watch. When you're able to bring the physical aspect, like kind of dance, I guess would be the foundation of that, or a good example of foundation of that, or combat perhaps, and then you bring the human element, in particular the human face and emotion into it, then you get something that's cinematic and you can watch them. So I think that's an interesting emergent thing that we're focused on that people don't think about as much, but I think is actually going to be important.
Yeah, I think on this one I'm split when I think about like me as a consumer, not as a developer who wants to, you know, at night after my kids go to sleep, I sit at my computer and play games, right? And it's a nice, peaceful, restful moment for me. So the idea of like running around and jogging around, I know it'd be a lot of fun, but is that the thing I want to do at night when I want to just chill out and relax? I don't know. I think there's going to be both. And one thing that you'll find out really quickly is VR fatigue. I think both sensory overload, right? Because we're just constantly, these are high action experiences, right? And people can just mentally get fatigued. And then we add the actual, physical component to that. It's a bit daunting. So it'll be interesting. We either become like super fit, human race because we're all running around in VR, or it's closer to WALL-E. Instead of big TVs, we have headsets,
Yeah. And it's probably a bit of both. And one probably will not exclude the other.
Yeah.
I can see people playing for a few hours Counter-Strike online on their PC, and then maybe they do half an hour VR experience at whatever they feel like doing at that time.
Or I think like people like us in the industry who fly around a lot. I would love to have a super VR on a plane. That'd be amazing. I can just be in my own awesome little world, ignore all the crap around me, all the strange people I don't know.
Some airlines are doing that.
Yeah, it's like first class. They give you like a gear VR. That's amazing. Obviously not a great environment to be running around. So I think it's gonna be a lot of hybrid experiences.
Yeah, and adding, you raise a good point that your active VR, you burn calories when you're active. We did a test with the Omni. If you play a first-person shooter for 1 hour on the Omni, you walk or run about 3 to 3.5 miles, and you burn about 350 calories. So it is almost, in addition to just entertainment, in our case, active also implies that you're active, you're burning calories while playing video games.
From a market standpoint, I like to look at it like sports. It's something that you gear up for, but once you're in there, you might only be in for an hour, maybe 2 tops, but it's the most fun you have all day long. You feel like the keynote, Dr. Drew at the keynote, you feel refreshed, right? That's how I feel when I come up active VR. I feel like I was able to kind of do something that I'm not normally really able to do unless I get a bunch of people together and get pick up a basketball game together or something, right? So it's that feeling that I really like.
Yeah, funny story sort of related to that, the number of calories you burn. Traditionally, in game development, we have tons of QA testers, and it's just, you go in a room, it'll be just hundreds of dudes sitting and just furiously playing video games for 12 hours a day. When I was working on a Connect title, we actually had a unique problem of they couldn't just sit there for 8-hour shifts. We had to break it up into 2-hour shifts and interleave it because they were just getting too worn out. And then we had some awesome just fitness stories of when they started the project, when they exited the project. It was kind of a
Biggest Loser type of through games. There's a TV show idea for anyone.
Which is that one was a very positive. It was really fun for me. I love that when you're in development, when you have these sort of hidden constraints or things, you're like, holy crap! Oh yeah, of course that's going to be something we have to think about now. And how do we not ruin that for people actually at home on their couch,
Yeah, one area we even explored at CES is the notion of esports for VR. And we had this two Omnis on stage with live commentators calling the action as 2 players were competing with each other in Omni Arena, multiplayer arena-style shooter, running and gunning, and adding that physical element to esports, adding the sports to esports in VR. Yeah. It's an area that we personally would love to see how that evolves.
VR sports, we need a new tagline.
Yeah.
So before I open it up to the questions from the floor, just in one concise word or two, just for those that are budding entrepreneurs looking to, get out there and solve some of the big problems. What is the biggest problem? What is the biggest challenge that you still see to shooters and active VR?
Well, before we jump into that, I'm just curious, show of hands, how many of you guys are interested in actually developing content for VR?
Oh, wow, that's terrific.
Okay, I was worried I was speaking to the wrong audience. So.
Not at all.
Cool.
I'll go ahead.
Well, fortunately this year, the hardware problem will go away. That's been a reality, is like getting your hands on some sort of motion track controller. Obviously, I'm just haggling to get one of your awesome devices in our office so we can
make
start
it
playing with it. Yeah, just availability of that stuff, but that obviously that's solving itself now.
Yeah.
I don't know, what some of the other challenges is like, yeah, just getting calibrated to what it takes to actually this new form of input. I don't know if it's really a challenge. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun work, right? It's work of discovery and just crazy ideas and trying things.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is locomotion.
Yeah.
And we have a solution, but it's it's still expensive. It's big. Not everybody has space for it. I mean, it obviously has limitations.
Yeah.
It's not perfect yet either. It's not perfectly tracking one-to-one yet. It's not. So it's not the perfect solution just yet either. On our end, we'll try to keep bringing the costs down, make it more affordable for people, make it more compact, make it as easy as possible to put away. Whatever hurdles our product still has, we'll try to fix those. But in general, locomotion, I think, is still there's a couple of different techniques that are now being explored: teleportation, funneling, or tunneling. There's a dozen of them, I think, now that people are exploring with.
Somebody just showed a cool teleport with a portal on there. It was like, that's brilliant. Why didn't we think of that?
Yeah, I actually think the best
Blinking.
one. The best one is the climbing simulator from Crytek.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
The ability to climb around something or climb around the world. People don't get nauseous from it for whatever reason.
Well, it's a weird thing. Again, perfect about VR. You can go up and not make people sick. You go down and people freak out, right? Like there's this awesome skyscraping jumping demo I saw. I forget the developer, unfortunately. It was like jumping up felt awesome. I'm like, yeah, I'm a superhero. Oh God, this is not right.
It's probably like in real life. It's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Well, it's so much of discovering like what's stuck away here in the lizard part of our brain. Like what are we built and how is our brain going to respond to certain situations? And sometimes it's intuitive. You figure it out. A lot of times we don't find out until, unfortunately, too late.
Nathan, got one big challenge?
Communication, actually.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. That's something, how people can actually be together inside virtual reality. I think there's a lot of challenges around that. It's something that as the AAA, let's say if VR gets massive adoption, you'll have a lot of AAA studios working on multiplayer titles, and so there'll be a lot more communication going on. But a lot of the VR experiences are isolating, especially when you have a large indie scene who typically uses those tools to make more independent kind of experiences.
Yeah, fortunately though, I'd say the game development industry has completely evolved many times in the last 10 years, the emergence of the indie team, the small team. You have tons of AAA veterans who aren't eager to go back to 200, 300 man projects, right? It's so much more fun when you've got a team of like 5 to 10 people and it's, you're just quickly iterating, making big things. And like game engines, right? Unreal Engine is available. You can go download Unity, you can download Crytek. Like there's lots of options that allow you're not starting from scratch. You can immediately within like 5 minutes build something in VR and have it in your headset. And that's huge. And the other part I've really appreciated is the openness of the community. And I hope that we retain this as we expand and welcome new developers into it. Is like, it's not about who's inventing what. It's like we're all on this sort of path of discovery and learning together. And it's, if you find something cool, share, tell the world. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, a lot of these great VR experiences are made by 5-people teams.
Yeah, or academics. So many great ideas coming out of students just fresh into school, right? It's definitely all over the place.
Yeah.
So I want to open the floor. Is there anybody out there that has an absolutely burning question that they would love to see this distinguished panel of experts answer for you?
And just shout it out.
And you'll shout it out and we'll
I'll
try and
repeat
repeat
the
it for you.
question,
Yeah.
Can you guys speak to some of the challenges and or discoveries that you guys have had involving very active VR, specifically exercising in VR? Obviously, there's a lot of things that come to mind, like sweat being one of the obvious ones. That's more of a hardware thing. But what can you guys speak to in that realm?
Sweat, you're definitely...
Exercising.
Let me repeat the question. Yeah, so the question is how to deal with very active VR, exercise and fitness in VR. And of course, the head-mounted display is fairly limited to protect against sweat, and hygiene is certainly an issue. Also, how does it feel like to run or be active with a head-mounted display on your head? The current versions are not really suited for that just yet, so the head-mounted display is probably the biggest constraint right now.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The first thing you'll find is you got to limit how fast people whip their heads around, because these things are just little bungee straps, basically, right? And same even before VR, the Wii, people were throwing those controllers into their TVs, so that's another real constraint.
Yeah, they lost a lawsuit.
Oh, really?
It was a class action lawsuit against Nintendo from people that broke their TV throwing the Wii
Never
controller
mind,
in
there's
the
a
TV.
So if you get
And
sued,
Nintendo
you're doing
lost.
something right.
There were 2 lawsuits, and one was won. Nintendo lost one class action lawsuit.
They won
because
at
of
the
it.
end, though. They're still alive. They're doing good, right? There's
Oh, yeah.
100 million of those things.
Best-selling game console ever, right?
Yeah.
Wii.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Cool. Other fun
I
questions?
think, in general, now that we've gotten over this notion that we have to be seated for a good VR experience, and now that we can stand, now that we can freely move, I think we'll see continued challenges arise from the various different peripherals that we add. Yes?
Yeah, so this kind of goes towards Ray, because I know Epic made Gears of War, which is a great third-person action adventure, kind of like Resident Evil 4. And one of the things I was wondering, as someone who loves third-person games and like really has a passion to develop those, is it wrong to approach a VR project with the idea of having a third-person camera, but maybe a third-person humanoid or a car or something like that?
Okay, so to paraphrase, can you approach VR with different styles of camera other than first person? Is that sort of the sentiment? Yeah, absolutely. And there's other fun things you can play with as well, like scale. We can actually for the first time give you a realistic sense of scale, which has been terrible on 2D screens for now. And then we can allow you to manipulate that, which is awesome. Immediately I'm the size of an ant or I'm the size of a giant, and there's all kinds of cool things that come from that. I think there are some great VR experiments with third-person cameras and God views. I'm so excited for the return of black and white. Peter Molyneux, wherever you are, please somebody make that kind of game again, right? Because to me, that was like a game that just didn't know it was waiting for VR. That sort of empowerment that'll come with that. So.
Yeah, and it's quite surprising. When I tried Lucky Stale for the first time, Lucky Stale was shipped with the Oculus Rift CV1.
The platformer, right?
Yeah, platformer, third-person platform game. Not something you would have thought of a few years ago when you thought of VR, that you're going to play a third-person platformer in VR. But it was the first VR experience that I did that I actually thought, wow, this is actually fun. It's not just wowing and impressive. It was a lot of fun. I think it's a great game that's coming out for VR. It's a third-person platformer. Yeah.
So I saw an experiment once where I put on a headmounted display, and then I could watch myself from a
the
fixed
third-person
camera.
thing, yeah.
From a third person, it's awesome, right? So imagine making like a Street Fighter game with that, where you make gestural motions to shoot fireballs and stuff, and you can do it with 2 different people, and you're actually fighting each other with your real bodies. Of course, you'd have real haptic feedback when you kick them in the face in real life, but
Lots of pillows.
But yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, that's a cool one like that. We can give you a sense of disembodiment for the first time. I don't know what you would use that for, but it's got to be something cool with that. Yeah.
Someone in the back.
So you want to build the live action metaverse, is that right?
That you can explore.
That you can explore. There are quite a few companies that just speaking to live capture and bringing that into VR. I've seen quite a few, depth, reconstruction, all kinds of cool stuff happening there. And I think, was it here? I saw a little robot with lasers that drives around and scans reality and does all kinds of cool stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I think VR is obviously, it's bigger than games. And some of the most fun things when we've brought Unreal Engine out is seeing applications in architectural visualization. Real-time photorealism is not as far away now. And it opened doors for all kinds of cool stuff. I think, one of you guys touched on maybe there's some really magical new social VR experiences, and that could be a backdrop for that. But,
There's a company in the Bay Area, it's called Penrose. Have you heard of it? Former Oculus.
Story studio,
yeah, and they're making VR movies, but not the VR movies that you're already seeing now, the 360 movies where you can look around and in 360 degrees. They're making VR movies where you can actually move around in a 3D space within the movie. That is really cool. And he sees that person, where he would see the 360 movies as just a step up to the actual VR movie where, as you describe it, where you are, just part of the movie and in the movie, not just from one point of view, but in 3D. You can walk around, move around,
Yeah, light
maybe
field tech-
interact.
yeah,
And that's blurring the line between, okay, is it a movie or is it a video game, right? Where's the line at that point between a game and a movie?
So
Yeah.
can you actually interact with the film itself, or can you just move around in a positional sense, like a light field display?
So it's
type of-
totally the return of the choose your own adventure books.
Okay, so it's branching narrative kind of
Nope.
for the interaction, or?
Well, initially it's just, I guess, the first phase you mentioned. But again, at what point can you then also start interacting? And
It's
then at
import-
what point is it a game or a movie?
It's-
It all becomes quite blurry at that.
And it's important to understand that interactivity and film, I guess I'll say, they're fundamentally like diametrically opposed as to how you make them, right? That's why you have that combinatorial explosion problem. When you make a game, you chop everything into tiny little pieces and then reassemble it all again, right? Which you just cannot do in a typical film. So you kind of have to like pick your poison, try to figure out which way you want to go and how static or dynamic you want something to be, and mix them a little bit in interesting ways.
Well, this is where the game industry brings its most value to the VR effort. Is for years and years we've been learning how to build simulations, from physics to AI, machine learning, traffic patterns, you name it, right? And these are the ingredients to start building these truly dynamic worlds. Yeah, it's frightening as a developer, or I've heard film directors to kind of shit their pants. Is like, holy crap, I can't control the camera. I've spent 20 years learning how to like make the perfect shot, and that's gone. How can I make anything that's a film? And the reality is like the trade-off for that is huge, right? That sense of presence and immersion, all those buzzwords apparently. It's totally worth it, and they're excited, they're reinvigorated. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the translation there.
This is one area that I'd kind of like to deviate from this notion of fidelity. We continue to sit there and think about realistic games and fantastic game engines that continue to push the boundaries graphically. One of the things that I think active VR actually brings to this stage is from an exploration perspective, there's the natural inquisitiveness that we all have when we just walk into some particular environment, whether it's a museum, whether it's to a cliff face where you want to look over in the Grand Canyon. There's a natural inquisitiveness. There's an exploration that you have that you've learned from as a small child. And I think that's one of the areas that active VR really has an opportunity to explore further, to where those natural actions, the things that you do in reality, now become part of this experience as well. To where, for instance, and I'm just going to use an analogy in shooter language, when you pick up the rifle and you actually aim down the sight, rather than having to have some sort of complex aiming algorithm take over for you, that's all of a sudden when this whole thing starts to really shift and really take a part in some sort of a new overarching experience. Mm-hmm. So with that, we really only have time for like one more burning question. So who has the best one?
The guy waving.
Oh, there's a really excited one in the back.
Yeah,
We'll
that
let
was-
that gentleman.
It's an obvious winner.
Okay, so one of my first VR experiences was this horror experience, Effective. Okay, and normally I'm a really big fan of horror. Okay, I watch a lot of horror movies, but when I tried that, I didn't have that disconnect that you have when you're just looking at it. When you're just looking at it on a screen, you know, you're actually in it. And I actually found that it wasn't fun. It was like too real, like too distressing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
My question to you guys is, what have you found when making shooter games or other such content with VR? At what point does it become too real or too visceral and become not fun?
I can just talk about Zombies on the holodeck when we built that as a horror game.
Good question.
You definitely, like, you guys know the concept of turning something up to 11. Like, horror in VR can go up to like 15 or something, like way, way, way too much. And so you realize it's much more powerful than you thought. You have the ability to startle people in a way that you never had before. So I just wanted to say that we found the same thing in Zombies.
Yeah, I totally with you. I love horror movies on my couch, but my God, you can give me a heart attack. And I'm reminded of like Dead Space, the game series. Like I really enjoyed playing those. Like it's so well crafted. The team did a fantastic job, but I had to stop because it was too stressful. It was just freaking me out, you know. Yeah, and it's the same thing with VR. I think somebody's bringing. Well, maybe I can't say. There's a lot of horror movies coming to VR, and I'm like, is that really the best idea? I don't know. We'll find out. I would say even before VR, as a game creator or just a creative in general, you know when you've gone too far. In Gears of War 2 development, if I remember correctly, we introduced a flamethrower, and we had one of our VFX artists do something or like, yeah, you've just crossed the line, you know, because, you know, Gears of War, we were having goofy fun with gore. It was over the top, the tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff, and we're like, whoa, wait a second, he's screaming, like, dial that back. And I think it's really important because we don't want to go build, you know, murder simulators and gun trainers and all that. That's not what we're here. We're here to entertain and to bring people to new experiences, you know, fun experiences.
Yeah, one of the first, actually the first demo we made made internally for the Omni was Trevor Shadow Ops, which is a linear 15-minute shooter. Fairly dark, not scary, but you're in these dark hallways and then some zombies appear. And we noticed that for quite a few people, it's a bit dark. I mean, they exit the demo and they're like, oh, you know, it's like, well, that was not our intention. They had a very immersive experience, but it leaves them a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, you
So
want
gotta
to
be careful.
empower the user. Like people would get super freaked out in zombies, but then they would like take a grenade off their chest and like blow the zombie up, and then they would feel good. They felt like they defended themselves. They had some tools.
So that was a fantastic question to end things up. Thank you very much for your attention. We really enjoyed, hopefully, thank you. And hopefully you will be encouraged to put in active components inside of your own VR experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.